A millionaire asked his ex for one last night before his wedding. She agreed, but she never imagined how it would change everything. I've worked on this story with all my heart for a full week. Please don't leave halfway. Chapter 10 will give you feelings that will stay with you forever. Hi, my beautiful family. May the Almighty bless you with health, joy, and endless love. But today, I must speak from my heart. Every story I create is not just a story. It is my sleepless nights, my tears, my soul, and my hard work poured out for you. When some of you leave halfway, it feels like my love and effort are thrown away. It breaks me, it destroys my spirit, and it hurts my channel's reputation. Do you not see how much I give for you? Please respect my sacrifice. Watch till the very end. If you are truly here, comment present. If you truly value me, comment I am with Mr. Peter. And to my new family, if you doubt me, ask my old family. They know my truth, my loyalty, and the love I have given without holding back. This is not just entertainment. It is my life, my dedication. Don't betray it. Together we can rise, but only if you stand with me until the last second. The coffee that spilled across Raphael Stone's $15,000 suit would cost him everything and give him the only thing that mattered. The clock on Moonbeam Cafe's wall read 11:47 p.m. when destiny decided to intervene in the most ordinary way possible. Outside, Manhattan's financial district hummed with restless energy, its towering glass monuments reflecting streetlights like golden tears against the October sky. Inside the small cafe, time seemed suspended in a warm bubble of caffeine-scented sanctuary for late-night souls needing refuge from the world's relentless demands. Raphael Stone pushed through the glass door with mechanical precision of a man who had forgotten how to move without purpose. At 32, he commanded a $12 billion empire, controlled thousands of employees' fates, and wielded influence that could topple governments. But tonight, after 18 consecutive hours of board meetings and hostile takeover negotiations, he felt as empty as the designer suit hanging perfectly on his 6'2" frame. His charcoal Armani jacket couldn't hide exhaustion that had settled into his bones like poison. His dark hair showed traces of frustrated fingers that had run through it during another day of making decisions affecting lives he would never know. Most telling, his piercing grey eyes held the hollow emptiness of someone who had everything and felt nothing. Behind the counter, Amara Wells wiped down the espresso machine with methodical rhythm of someone who found meditation in routine. At 28, she possessed natural beauty that needed no enhancement, dark skin that seemed to glow with inner light, expressive brown eyes holding depths most people spent lifetimes trying to access, and a smile that could transform ordinary moments into magic. Her curly hair was pulled back practically, and her simple uniform couldn't disguise graceful movements, as if every gesture was a brushstroke on invisible canvas. The letter lay crumpled beside the cash register like a physical manifestation of crushed dreams. The gallery director's cold rejection haunted her. While your technical skill is undeniable, your work contains too much raw emotion for our current exhibition needs. Contemporary buyers prefer pieces that complement their decor rather than challenge their comfort zones. 27 galleries, 27 rejections, each one a variation on the same theme. Her art was too honest, too vulnerable, too real for a world preferring beautiful lies to difficult truths. She had spent 3 years perfecting her craft, pouring her heart onto canvas with desperate hope that someone, somewhere, would see beauty in pain transformed into something eternal. The tears had been threatening all evening, held back only by customers needing late-night caffeine who didn't deserve to witness her private heartbreak. But now, with only one customer remaining, a businessman who looked as emotionally devastated as she felt, the dam was beginning to crack. Raphael approached the counter with measured steps of someone carrying invisible burdens. He had come here because his penthouse felt like a mausoleum tonight. The cafe, with mismatched chairs and local artwork covering every wall, offered something his billions couldn't buy: the promise of human connection. "What can I get you?" Amara asked, her voice professionally cheerful despite tears she was fighting. "Coffee. Black. The strongest you have," Raphael replied automatically, then paused as he really looked at her. Something in her expression, vulnerability matching his own, made him add, "Long day?" It was such a simple question, such ordinary human interaction, but it shattered the last of Amara's composure. The tears she had been holding back spilled over, and she turned away quickly, grabbing for the coffee pot with trembling hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice breaking. "I'm being completely unprofessional. I got another rejection today, and I can't seem to do anything right." The coffee pot slipped from her fingers as a violent sob escaped. Raphael watched in slow motion as glass shattered against worn wooden planks, sending hot coffee and broken fragments across the floor. But it was Amara's reaction that captured his attention. Instead of cursing or panicking, she simply stood there, looking down at the mess as if it were a perfect metaphor for her entire life. "I'm so sorry," she cried, immediately dropping to her knees to clean up destruction. "I can pay for the pot. God, I can't even serve coffee without destroying something." Raphael found himself moving without conscious thought, kneeling beside her on the coffee-stained floor. His $15,000 suit absorbed spilled liquid, and for the first time in years, he didn't calculate cost or dry cleaning bills. All that mattered was the woman beside him, whose genuine distress had awakened something in his chest he had thought permanently dormant. "Hey," he said softly, his hand covering hers as she reached for sharp glass. "Don't worry about the coffee pot. Tell me about the rejection. What were you rejected from?" Amara looked up through tear-blurred eyes, surprised by gentleness in his voice. Most customers would have been annoyed by delay, frustrated by mess, demanding immediate fixes, but this man was kneeling in spilled coffee and asking about her dreams. "Art gallery," she managed between shaky breaths. "The Morrison Gallery downtown. They said my work has too much emotion, not enough commercial appeal." How do you make pain commercially appealing? How do you turn heartbreak into something matching someone's living room decor? Raphael felt something crack inside his chest. Here was a woman who created beauty from pain, who poured her soul into art, who wanted to share deepest emotions with the world, and she was being told her authenticity was too uncomfortable for people to live with. "Maybe the problem isn't your pain," he said, his voice carrying conviction that surprised them both. "Maybe it's that the world has forgotten how to feel." Amara stared at him, her hands stilling in cleanup efforts. "You're different from anyone I've ever met. There's sadness in your eyes that matches mine." The observation hit Raphael like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had looked past his wealth, his power, his carefully constructed success image, and seen the human being underneath? "I've been numb for so long, I forgot what feeling looked like," he admitted, words escaping before he could stop them, "until right now." They stayed there on the floor, surrounded by broken glass and spilled coffee, and Raphael realized this was the most honest conversation he'd had in years. This woman, this stranger who served coffee and painted heartbreak onto canvas, had accomplished something billion-dollar deals never could. She had made him remember what it felt like to be human. "I'm Amara," she said softly, extending her hand with a shy smile that transformed her tear-stained face into something luminous. "And you're someone who understands what it means to be lonely in a crowded world." "Raphael," he replied, taking her hand and feeling electricity shoot up his arm from simple contact. "And you're someone who just reminded me that my heart still works." They helped each other stand, and Raphael found himself reluctant to release her hand. Around them, the cafe felt like a sanctuary from the world outside, a place where two broken people could recognize fractures in each other and maybe, just maybe, begin the delicate process of healing. Would you like to have dinner sometime? Raphael asked, his voice carrying nervous vulnerability he hadn't felt since 16. Somewhere that serves food on actual plates, where the biggest risk is a bad review instead of broken glass. Amara laughed, the first genuine laugh she'd managed all day, and Raphael thought it was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. I'd like that, but fair warning, I'm probably going to spill something on you again. I'm counting on it, Raphael said, and meant it completely. As they exchanged numbers and made plans for the following evening, neither realized they had just experienced the kind of collision that changes entire lives' trajectory. They were simply two lonely people who had found something precious in broken coffee pot wreckage and shared pain honesty. Outside, Manhattan continued its relentless dance of ambition and desire, but inside Moonbeam Cafe, destiny had already begun weaving threads of a love story that would test every belief they held about trust, loyalty, and the price of choosing happiness over safety. Chapter 2. Falling Deeper. The small Italian restaurant had witnessed 1,000 first dates, but none quite like the one where a billionaire learned to breathe again, and an artist discovered that some souls were worth painting in permanent ink. Bella Luna existed in a pocket of old Manhattan that developers had forgotten, tucked between a vintage bookstore and a flower shop run by an elderly Italian woman who spoke to her roses in 3 languages. The restaurant's weathered brick exterior and hand-painted sign whispered of authenticity in a city increasingly dominated by corporate chains designed for Instagram rather than intimacy. Raphael Stone had jogged past this corner hundreds of times, but tonight, as he waited for Amara at a table barely large enough for 2, he felt more exposed than during his first hostile takeover. His hands, the same hands that had signed billion-dollar contracts without trembling, now fidgeted with simple silverware as if he'd never eaten with civilized implements. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was more nervous about dinner with a woman who served coffee than he'd been about any business negotiation in his adult life. The brass bell chimed, and Raphael's breath caught as Amara entered like poetry in motion. She wore a deep burgundy dress that seemed designed by someone who understood true elegance lay in simplicity perfected. Her hair fell in natural waves catching the amber lighting, and she carried a vintage leather satchel, undoubtedly containing sketchbooks, the tools of someone who never stopped translating the world into art. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said, sliding across from him with movements that seemed choreographed by grace itself. "I lost myself in a painting and forgot about time. It happens when my emotions are too big for my body to contain." "You're nervous?" Raphael asked, surprise and relief warring in his voice. "I've been sitting here wondering if I should have chosen somewhere more impressive." Amara looked around Bella Luna with the focused attention of someone who collected beautiful moments. She took in the mismatched chairs, wine bottles converted to candle holders, and faded photographs of Tuscany covering every surface. "This is perfect," she said with sincerity that made everything sound like a promise. "It feels alive, like the kind of place where people come to fall in love instead of just being seen falling in love." "I don't know many places like that," Raphael admitted. "Most of my dinners are elaborate performances where everyone calculates what they can gain. I can't remember the last time I ate somewhere just because I wanted to savor the experience." "Then tonight we savor everything," Amara said, reaching across to cover his hand with hers. The contact sent electricity racing up his arm, but more than physical attraction, he felt genuine human connection, something he'd been starving for without realizing it. "Tell me about your favorite meal, not the most expensive, your favorite." Raphael searched his memory for moments of genuine pleasure rather than professional obligation. "Grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup," he said quietly, My mother used to make them when I was sick. She'd cut off the crusts and arrange the triangles like flower petals, then tell me stories about brave princes who conquered kingdoms with kindness instead of swords. How old were you when you lost them? Amara asked, with the gentle authority of someone who understood grief needed acknowledgement rather than avoidance. 16, Raphael replied, surprised by how easily the words came. Car accident on an icy night. They were driving home from my school's winter concert, where I'd played violin. For years afterward, I couldn't listen to classical music without feeling like their death was my fault. Music didn't kill them, Raphael, Amara said softly, her thumb tracing circles on his knuckles. Love did. Love for you, pride in you, the kind of fierce parental devotion that makes people drive through ice storms to hear their son play 3 minutes of Vivaldi. That's not your burden, that's your inheritance. The words hit like revelation. In 16 years of therapy, no one had ever reframed his parents' death as an act of love rather than tragic circumstance. What about your family? He asked, needing to shift focus before overwhelming gratitude became tears. My grandmother raised me from age 7, Amara said, her eyes taking on the soft glow people get when remembering someone who shaped their soul. My parents were teenagers when I was born, babies having a baby, as Grandma used to say. They tried for a few years, but they were more interested in being young and free than learning how to love someone who needed them completely. That must have been devastating. Actually, it was liberating, Amara said, with a smile, suggesting she'd made peace with old wounds. Grandma taught me that some people are born to be passionate lovers, others devoted parents, and wisdom lies in understanding which you are before damaging someone by trying to be what you're not. Do you miss them? I miss the idea of them. But Grandma gave me something more valuable, stories that taught me to see magic in ordinary moments. She used to say every star in the sky was just a soul who had loved so deeply that when their physical body couldn't contain that love anymore, it became eternal light. I've been living in darkness so long I forgot stars existed, Raphael said quietly. What happened to you? Amara asked, leaning forward with the intensity of someone who collected broken hearts and specialized in their repair. What took someone with such capacity for gentleness and convinced him that success was more important than joy? The question cut directly to every defense mechanism he'd spent years constructing. Fear happened. Grief happened. After my parents died, I built walls so high nothing could hurt me again. But those walls became a prison, keeping out everything good along with everything dangerous. Including love? Especially love. Because love requires vulnerability, and vulnerability had gotten the two most important people in my life killed. The waiter appeared, a young man whose genuine smile suggested he enjoyed his job. Raphael watched in fascination as Amara engaged him in conversation about his studies, his dreams, his girlfriend studying medicine. She remembered his name from previous visits, asked follow-up questions about things mentioned weeks ago, and treated him like a valued human being rather than invisible service. You do that naturally, Raphael observed after the waiter left glowing. Make people feel important, like their stories matter. Everyone does matter, Amara said, as if it were obvious truth. That's Paulo. He's working 3 jobs for culinary school while sending money home to Brazil. Everyone has a story worth honoring, and most people go through their entire day without anyone asking what that story is. Their simple pasta dishes arrived, tasting like someone's grandmother had poured generations of love into every ingredient. As they ate, Amara told him about her art, about how colors could capture emotions words weren't sophisticated enough to express. Raphael shared stories he hadn't told anyone. Childhood dreams of composing music, the crushing loneliness that drove 18-hour workdays to avoid empty rooms echoing with loss. When did you stop composing? Amara asked. The day my parents died. Music felt too dangerous, too emotional, too connected to everything I was trying not to feel. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard," Amara said, genuine grief in her eyes for the artist he'd buried under protective ambition. After dinner, they walked through neighborhood streets beginning to show autumn's first hints. The October air carried the promise of change, and Amara pulled her jacket closer as they strolled past closed shops and apartments where families settled into nighttime routines. "Cold?" Raphael asked, immediately shrugging out of his cashmere sweater. "Raphael, you don't need to—" But he was already draping the soft fabric around her shoulders, hands lingering as he pulled it closed at her throat. The sweater smelled like expensive cologne, and something indefinably masculine that made her pulse quicken. "Thank you," she whispered, looking up into his face. They had stopped walking without realizing it, standing under a streetlight, casting them in golden illumination. Raphael's hands were still at her throat, and she could see herself reflected in his piercing grey eyes. For a moment stretching like eternity, the busy city faded away, leaving only them and electricity crackling between their bodies. "Amara," Raphael said, her name sounding like a prayer. "Yes? I think you're saving me from myself without even trying." "You don't need saving," she replied, her hand touching his face with trembling fingers. "You just need remembering who you were before the world convinced you that protecting yourself was more important than connecting with others." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away. But Amara rose on her tiptoes to meet him halfway, and when their lips touched, Raphael felt every wall around his heart crumble like ancient ruins surrendering to time. The kiss started soft, tentative, a question asked and answered in touch. But when Amara pressed closer and let her hands tangle in his hair, it deepened into something desperate and hungry, full of all the emotions they'd shared across the dinner table. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, foreheads pressed together, they tried to process the magnitude of what was happening. "I've never felt this safe with anyone," Amara whispered against his lips. "You're the first person who's ever looked at me and seen a man instead of a bank account," Raphael replied. "The first person who's made me want to be worthy of how you see me." As they held each other under the streetlight, both realized they were falling into something deeper and more dangerous than anything they'd experienced. This wasn't attraction-seeking outlet or loneliness-seeking company. This was the kind of connection that changed people at the cellular level, making them willing to risk everything built separately for the chance to build something beautiful together. Neither was ready to name it yet, but love had already begun its quiet revolution in their hearts. Chapter 3. Love's Awakening. The tears that fell in the Metropolitan Museum's Van Gogh exhibit weren't from tourists admiring Starry Night. They belonged to a billionaire watching the woman he loved discover that her pain could become eternal beauty. 4 weeks after their first dinner, Raphael Stone found himself experiencing emotions he had forgotten existed. The penthouse that had once felt like a monument to success now seemed hollow without Amara's presence to fill its expensive emptiness with life. She had stayed over twice, carefully, tentatively, both dancing around their connection's intensity, and each morning when she left for the cafe, Raphael felt like she was taking all the warmth with her. This morning was different. He had convinced her to let him take her somewhere that mattered to him, somewhere he had never taken another woman because it required vulnerability he had never been willing to share. The Metropolitan Museum held memories that had nothing to do with business networking and everything to do with the man he used to be before success calcified around his heart like armor. "I can't believe you got them to open the museum just for us," Amara said as they walked through empty corridors, footsteps echoing in vast spaces normally filled with crowds. "Money has its advantages," Raphael replied, but his voice carried none of its usual confidence. "Though I should warn you, this isn't about impressing you with what I can afford. This is about sharing something that matters to me." Amara stopped walking and turned to face him fully, her dark eyes searching his face with intensity that always made him feel like she could see directly into his soul. "What is this really about, Raphael?" He took a deep breath, preparing to expose a part of himself he had kept hidden for 16 years. "My mother loved Van Gogh. She said his paintings proved that pain could become beauty if you were brave enough to transform it into something the world could understand." "And you've never been back since she died," Amara said softly, understanding flooding her expression. "I couldn't. Every time I tried, I'd remember her standing in front of the starry night, crying, because she said it was the most honest thing she'd ever seen. A man painting his madness into something so beautiful that people would look at it for centuries and feel less alone." They entered the post-impressionist wing, and Raphael felt his chest tighten as they approached the painting that had shaped his understanding of art, emotion, and the way beauty could emerge from deepest darkness. But instead of crushing grief he expected, he felt something else entirely as he watched Amara encounter Van Gogh's masterpiece for the first time. She stood transfixed before the swirling blues and yellows, hands pressed to her heart as tears began flowing down her cheeks. "Oh my God," she whispered, "he painted his madness into beauty. His pain became immortal art." "You do the same thing," Raphael said quietly, moving to stand beside her. "Every sketch you've shown me bleeds emotion. Every piece you create turns your pain into something that makes other people feel less alone." "Art is just another word for loving something so much it hurts," Amara replied, her voice thick with tears. "But this is what I want to do with my life. Not paint pretty pictures that match people's sofas, but create honest things that remind people what it feels like to be human." Raphael watched her study the painting's details, saw how she traced air in front of the canvas as if she could feel Van Gogh's brushstrokes, and realized he was witnessing something sacred. This woman didn't just observe art, she experienced it, absorbed it, let it transform her from within. "Come with me," he said, taking her hand and leading her to a bench positioned perfectly for viewing. "I want to tell you something I've never told anyone." They sat together in the empty gallery, surrounded by masterpieces that had outlived their creators, and Raphael began to speak words locked in his heart for years. "When I was 10, I had an accident, fell off my bike and broke my arm in 3 places. I was hospitalized for weeks, and pain medication made me so sick I couldn't keep food down. My mother brought art books to my room and told me stories about painters, about how they turned their worst experiences into their greatest triumphs. That's when you learned that pain could become something beautiful," Amara said, understanding the shape of his story before he finished. "She died 6 years later, and I forgot everything she taught me about transformation. I let my pain become anger, my grief become ambition, my loneliness become success. I built an empire on the graves of my emotions. But you brought me here," Amara pointed out, "to the place where you learned about beauty born from pain. That's not forgetting, that's remembering." Raphael turned to look at her, this woman who had walked into his life and somehow managed to excavate the man he thought he had buried forever. "You're not just making me remember, Amara. You're making me feel things I thought I had trained myself out of feeling." "What kinds of things?" "Hope, joy, the desire to create something meaningful instead of just acquiring things that prove my worth." He paused, gathering courage for the next confession. "Love." The word hung between them like a bridge across impossible distance. They had been dancing around it for weeks, feeling its presence in every touch, every shared story, every moment when their eyes met, and the rest of the world faded away. But saying it aloud made it real, dangerous, transformative. "Raphael," Amara whispered, her voice carrying wonder and fear in equal measure. "I know it's too soon. I know we've only known each other 4 weeks, but I need you to understand that what I feel for you isn't just attraction or loneliness or the novelty of someone who doesn't want my money. This is—" He struggled to find words adequate to the earthquake happening in his chest. "This is the kind of love that changes people, that makes them willing to rebuild their entire life around the possibility of happiness." Amara stood from the bench and moved to stand directly in front of him, her hands framing his face as she looked into his eyes with an intensity that made him feel simultaneously exposed and completely safe. "I love you too," she said simply. "Not because you're perfect, but because with you, I finally am. You don't complete me, Raphael. You inspire me to complete myself." The kiss that followed was different from their first tentative exploration outside the restaurant. This was deeper, hungrier, filled with weeks of growing attraction and overwhelming relief of finally acknowledging what they both felt. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard, foreheads pressed together as they tried to process the magnitude of what they had just declared. "Take me home," Amara whispered against his lips. "Take me to your home, and show me what it looks like when you're not pretending to be someone else." The ride back to Raphael's penthouse passed in electric silence, hands intertwined as they watched Manhattan blur past car windows. But instead of the sterile showcase Amara expected, Raphael led her to a part of his apartment she had never seen. A small room filled with easels, canvases, and art supplies that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. "You paint," she said, her voice filled with wonder as she examined the abandoned art studio. "I used to, before I decided that creating things was less important than owning them." Raphael picked up a brush, its bristles stiff with disuse. "I haven't touched any of this since college. Why did you stop?" "Because art requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is weakness in business. Because creating something means risking failure, and I couldn't afford to fail." He set the brush down carefully. "Because making art means admitting you have feelings, and feelings were a luxury I couldn't afford." Amara moved around the room, examining half-finished canvases that spoke of talent abandoned and dreams deferred. "These are beautiful, Raphael. This one especially." She stopped in front of a painting showing a night sky filled with stars, clearly influenced by Van Gogh, but carrying its own unique emotional weight. "I painted that the night before my parents' funeral," he said quietly. "I was trying to capture what my mother meant when she said pain could become beauty, but I never finished it." "Maybe it's time," Amara suggested gently. Instead of responding with words, Raphael moved to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist as he buried his face in her neck. She smelled like paint and coffee and something indefinably feminine that made his chest tight with longing. "I've never been afraid of anything in business," he confessed against her skin. "But I'm terrified of how much I need you." "Need isn't weakness," Amara replied, turning in his arms to face him. "It's what makes us human. It's what connects us to each other instead of living in isolation." "You're not just making love to me," Raphael said as he led her toward his bedroom. "You're making me remember what it feels like to be alive." Their lovemaking was slow, emotional, transformative. Every touch carried the weight of their shared confessions. Every kiss tasted of tears and truth, and overwhelming relief of finally being completely honest with another human being. When Amara traced the scar on Raphael's arm from his childhood accident, he didn't feel ashamed of the mark. He felt grateful for the story it allowed him to share. When he kissed the paint stains on her fingers with reverence, she didn't feel embarrassed by evidence of her passion. She felt celebrated for the things that made her who she was. "These scars are proof you survived," Amara whispered as they lay tangled together afterward, her fingertips mapping the geography of his body. "My heart has scars too. Maybe broken people are meant to heal each other." "I love you," Raphael said again, the words coming easier now that he had said them once. Not because you're perfect, but because with you, I finally am. I love you too, Amara replied, her head pillowed on his chest, where she could hear the steady rhythm of his heart. You don't complete me, Raphael. You inspire me to complete myself. As they fell asleep in each other's arms, surrounded by luxury money could buy, but filled with contentment only love could provide, both understood they had crossed a line from which there was no return. They had become essential to each other's happiness, necessary for each other's growth, willing to risk everything they had built separately for the chance to build something beautiful together. What neither knew was that their love was about to be tested in ways they couldn't imagine, by forces they didn't see coming, and by a past that Raphael thought he had left behind forever. Chapter 4. Hearts United. The Ring. Raphael's stone, designed for Amara Wells, contained a stone that matched her eyes exactly, but the tears that filled those eyes when he proposed would shine brighter than any diamond ever could. 2.5 months into their love affair, though calling it an affair seemed inadequate for something that had reconstructed both their souls, Raphael found himself planning a future that had nothing to do with quarterly earnings or market expansion. Instead, he spent his days thinking about Amara's laugh when she discovered new art techniques, the soft sounds she made sleeping curled against his chest, and the growing certainty that he wanted to spend his life learning the infinite ways she could surprise him. The ring had taken 8 weeks to create, not because the jeweler lacked skill, but because Raphael insisted on perfection, bordering on obsession. The central stone, a rare cognac diamond capturing the exact shade of Amara's eyes when sunlight hit them, had been sourced from a South African mine whose ethical practices met Raphael's increasingly complex moral requirements. Since falling in love with Amara, he questioned every aspect of his business empire, wondering how many profitable ventures caused suffering that would break her artist's heart. The setting was understated elegance. White gold worked into delicate swirls, resembling brushstrokes, with smaller diamonds arranged to catch light from every angle. But the most important detail was invisible. Inside the band, engraved in microscopic script, were words that had become Raphael's daily prayer: "You inspire me to complete myself." Tonight, on the rooftop garden where they had first said, "I love you," under stars arranged specifically for lovers, Raphael would ask Amara to marry him. The space had been transformed into fairy tale perfection. Thousands of tiny lights strung between trees, candles flickering in hurricane glass, and Amara's favorite white peonies arranged in clusters that looked natural despite requiring a team of florists. But Raphael's hands shook as he adjusted his tie, not because of elaborate setup or the ring weighing heavy in his pocket, but because he was about to ask the most important question of his life to the woman who had taught him that vulnerability was courage's highest form. "You're nervous," Amara observed as they rode the elevator to the roof, her artist's eye cataloguing tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched with metronomic precision. "Should I not be nervous?" Raphael asked, attempting lightness while his heart hammered against his ribs. "I'm about to have dinner with the most beautiful woman in New York." Amara smiled with gentle concern, reserved for moments when she sensed him struggling with emotions too large for words. "Raphael, it's just me. You don't have to perform or impress or be anything other than exactly who you are." "That's exactly why I'm nervous," he admitted as elevator doors opened to reveal the transformed rooftop. "Because what I'm feeling for you is so far beyond anything I've experienced that I don't have words, and I'm terrified words will be completely inadequate." Amara's breath caught as she stepped onto the rooftop, hands flying to her mouth at the magical transformation of their special place. "Raphael, this is... When did you have time?" "I've been planning this for weeks," he said, leading her to the table positioned perfectly for viewing the city skyline. "I wanted to give you something beautiful, something matching how you make me feel." They sat as the sun set behind Manhattan's towering spires, painting the sky in gold and pink, rivaling any museum masterpiece. Raphael had arranged for dinner to be prepared by their favorite chef from the Italian restaurant, each course arriving with precise timing suggesting military coordination. But Raphael barely tasted the food, too focused on memorizing every detail, candlelight playing across Amara's face, her laughter at his awkward teenage poetry stories, the grace with which she moved when describing her painting inspired by their love, a piece she planned to title "Collision of Stars." "I need to tell you something," Raphael said as they finished the main course, his voice carrying gravity that made Amara set down her wineglass and give complete attention. "You're scaring me," she said softly. "The way you're looking at me. It's like you're memorizing my face." "I am," Raphael admitted, "because I'm about to do something that will either be the most important moment of my life or the most catastrophic mistake, and I want to remember exactly how you look before everything changes." He stood with movements that seemed choreographed despite adrenaline coursing through his system, then moved around the table to kneel beside her chair. Her sharp intake told him she understood what was happening, but he needed to say the words, to give voice to emotions building in his chest for months. "Amara Wells," he began, his voice stronger now that he'd committed to the moment. "2.5 months ago, you spilled coffee on my suit and inadvertently spilled hope into my heart. Before you, I thought success meant conquering the world. Now I know it means finding the person who makes you want to be conquered by love." Tears were already flowing down Amara's cheeks, but she remained perfectly still, as if moving might break the spell. "You saved me from a life of existing without living," Raphael continued, pulling the ring box from his jacket with hands that no longer trembled. "You turned my house into a home, my money into meaning, my heart into something worth giving. You didn't complete me, you inspired me to complete myself. Will you marry me?" The ring caught candlelight and threw it back in brilliant fragments, dancing across Amara's face. For a moment, she simply stared at the symbol of his love, hands pressed to her heart, as if trying to keep it from bursting. "Raphael," she whispered, voice thick with tears, "it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "Does that mean yes?" he asked, hope and terror warring in his expression. "Yes." Amara laughed through her tears, extending her left hand with slightly shaking fingers. 1,000 times yes. You don't just want to marry me, Raphael. You want to choose me every day for the rest of our lives." Raphael slipped the ring onto her finger with reverence, usually reserved for religious ceremonies, both watching as the cognac diamond caught light and seemed to glow with inner fire. "This ring has a stone that matches your eyes," Raphael said, lifting her hand to press a gentle kiss to her knuckles, "because I want you to see forever in it." "I don't need diamonds to know I'm treasured," Amara replied, pulling him up so she could frame his face with her hands. "Your love is the only precious thing I need." They kissed then, surrounded by candlelight and distant city sounds, and Raphael felt something fundamental shift inside his chest. This wasn't just romantic love or passionate attraction. This was partnership, commitment, the decision to build a life together greater than the sum of their individual parts. "When?" Amara asked when they finally broke apart, both breathless from the moment's intensity. "When what? When do you want to get married?" "Because now that I've said yes, I don't want to wait long to become your wife." Raphael laughed, the sound carrying pure joy, having nothing to do with business success or financial achievements. "Tomorrow. Next week, I'll marry you whenever you're ready." "Let's plan something beautiful," Amara said, settling back but keeping hold of his hand. "Not huge or extravagant, just perfect, meaningful, something reflecting who we are together." They spent the rest of the evening planning their wedding, sharing dreams about their future, discussing how their love had already changed them and ways they wanted to continue growing together. Raphael talked about using his wealth for meaningful purposes, maybe establishing an arts foundation, helping struggling artists avoid the rejections that had brought Amara to tears in the cafe where they met. Amara spoke about creating art, celebrating love in all its forms, pieces reminding people that beauty could emerge from unexpected collisions. "I want to design my own dress," Amara said, as they slow danced to music only they could hear. "Something that feels like me, like us. And I want to write my own vows." "What will they say?" Raphael asked, spinning her gently under his arm. "That you taught me the difference between being loved and being treasured," Amara replied. "That you showed me what it means to be seen completely and chosen anyway. That you're not just my partner. You're my person." "I want to write mine too," Raphael said, pulling her close again. "I want to promise you things no one has ever promised before." "Like what?" "Like I'll never stop being amazed by you. Like I'll choose you again every morning for the rest of my life. Like I'll love you when you're 90 and tell you you're beautiful when your hair is grey and your hands are too arthritic to hold a paintbrush." "You're going to make me cry again," Amara laughed, but tears were already gathering. "Happy tears this time," Raphael said, kissing the salt from her cheeks. "Only happy tears from now on." 3 weeks later, Raphael stood in his penthouse office, surrounded by wedding preparations and drowning in happiness he had never imagined possible. The invitations, designed by Amara, featuring an original watercolor of their coffee shop, had been sent to their small list of close friends and family. The venue, a botanical garden in Central Park, had been booked, along with the string quartet and photographer who specialized in capturing authentic emotion. Everything was perfect. Everything was exactly as they had dreamed, which was why the phone call that came 2 days before their wedding would destroy everything they had built and test whether their love was strong enough to survive the weight of the past. "Mr. Stone?" The voice belonged to Marcus Webb, his head of security, carrying urgency that made Raphael's stomach drop. "We need to talk. There's been a development concerning your wedding that requires immediate attention." "What kind of development?" "The kind that involves someone you thought was dead." The words hit Raphael like a physical blow, because there was only one person from his past whose return could threaten his future with Amara. "Isabella," he whispered, her name tasting like poison. "She's alive, sir, and she wants to see you." Chapter 5. The Devastating Request. The phone call that shattered Raphael Stone's perfect world came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, exactly 2 days before he was supposed to marry the woman who had taught him that love could heal even the most broken hearts. Raphael stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, watching city lights blur through October rain that had been falling since sunset. Behind him, Amara slept peacefully in their bed, her dark hair spread across the pillow like spilled ink, one hand extended toward the space where he should have been lying beside her. The engagement ring caught dim light from the hallway, its cognac diamond winking like a small star on her finger, and Raphael felt his chest tighten with overwhelming gratitude that had become his constant companion since she said yes. 2 days. In 2 days, he would marry the woman who had transformed his understanding of what it meant to be alive. 2 days until he could call Amara his wife, until they could begin the future they had planned together during late-night conversations that lasted until sunrise. 2 days until he would be complete in a way he had never imagined possible. The phone's shrill ring shattered the peaceful silence like breaking glass. Raphael glanced at the caller ID and felt his blood turn to ice. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code belonged to a part of his past he had buried so deeply that seeing it now felt like watching his own ghost materialize in the darkness. "Hello?" he answered, his voice carefully neutral despite the warning bells screaming in his head. Raphael. The voice that spoke his name was like a knife wrapped in silk, familiar and dangerous and carrying the weight of memories he had spent 2 years trying to forget. It's Isabella. The phone nearly slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers. Isabella Cross, the woman who had been his entire world before Amara showed him what love actually meant. The woman who had died in a car accident 2 years ago, whose funeral he had attended, whose grave he had visited on the anniversary of her death just last month. That's impossible, Raphael whispered, sinking into the leather chair by the window. You're dead. I saw the wreckage. I identified the body. I buried you. You buried someone who looked like me, Isabella replied, her voice carrying the sophisticated British accent that had once made his pulse quicken with desire. Someone who was unfortunately in the wrong place at the wrong time when I needed to disappear from some very dangerous people. Why? The word came out as a broken sob. Why fake your death? Why let me believe I had lost you? Because I was young and scared and stupid, Isabella said, and Raphael could hear tears in her voice that sounded genuine. Because the people I owed money to were going to kill us both if I didn't find a way to vanish completely. Because I thought you deserved better than a woman who had made such catastrophic mistakes. Raphael closed his eyes, memories flooding back despite his desperate attempts to keep them buried. Isabella had been his first real love. The woman who had taught him that vulnerability could be addictive, that giving someone complete power over your happiness was both terrifying and intoxicating. They had been engaged for 8 months when she died, 8 months of planning a future that had been destroyed in a single phone call from the police. I mourned you, he said, his voice breaking. I grieved for 2 years. I thought love was something that only brought pain, that I was cursed to lose everyone I cared about. I know, Isabella whispered, and I'm so sorry. If I could take back the pain I caused you, I would. But Raphael, I need you to understand, I never stopped loving you, not for a single day in the past 2 years. Isabella, Raphael started, but she interrupted him with words that felt like grenades exploding in his chest. I know you're getting married. I know about Amara Wells. I know you think you've moved on and found happiness with someone else. I have found happiness, Raphael said firmly, though his voice lacked the conviction he wished he felt. Amara isn't a replacement for you. She's the woman I was meant to find. What we have is real, Isabella. It's built on truth and honesty and I'm getting married too, Isabella interrupted, her words hitting him like a physical blow. In 4 days. To a man I don't love, in a ceremony that feels like a funeral for everything I actually wanted. The silence that followed was deafening. Raphael could hear his own heartbeat, could hear the rain against the windows, could hear Amara shifting in her sleep in the next room, but he couldn't hear anything that made sense of what Isabella was telling him. Why are you calling me? He asked finally. Because I made the biggest mistake of my life when I left you, Isabella said, her voice thick with tears. Because every day for the past 2 years I've regretted choosing safety over love. Because I'm about to make another mistake by marrying someone else, and I can't do it without telling you the truth. What truth? That I never stopped loving you. That every breath I've taken since I left has been borrowed time. That if I'm going to marry someone else and spend the rest of my life pretending to be happy, I need closure. Real closure. Raphael felt the room spinning around him, felt the careful edifice of his new life beginning to crack under the weight of his past. What are you asking me, Isabella? I'm asking for one night, she said quietly. One last night together, before we both get married to other people. One night to say goodbye properly, to find some kind of peace with what we had and what we lost. You're asking me to cheat on the woman I love, Raphael said, though even as he spoke the words, he could feel something treacherous stirring in his chest. Not desire for Isabella exactly, but a desperate need for closure with the ghost that had haunted him for 2 years. I'm asking you to find out if what you feel for her is strong enough to survive the truth about what you felt for me, Isabella replied. I'm asking you to be completely sure before you promise her forever that you're not just running away from unfinished business. The request hit Raphael like a sledgehammer to the chest. Was his love for Amara real, or was it simply the refuge he had found from his grief over Isabella? Had he truly moved on, or had he simply found someone kind enough to help him avoid dealing with his unresolved feelings? I can't, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. One night, Raphael. Just to talk, to find closure, to put our past to rest so we can both move forward without wondering, what if? If you're as sure about Amara as you claim to be, then seeing me shouldn't threaten that. And if I say no, then I'll disappear again, and you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if you married Amara because you loved her completely, or because you were afraid to face the truth about us. Raphael ended the call without saying goodbye, his hands shaking as he set the phone on the table and tried to process the earthquake that had just rearranged his entire emotional landscape. Behind him, he heard soft footsteps on the hardwood floor, and turned to see Amara approaching in one of his old Columbia t-shirts, her hair tousled from sleep and her eyes soft with concern. "Who was that?" she asked, settling into his lap and wrapping her arms around his neck. "You look like you've seen a ghost." The irony of her words nearly broke him. It was a business call. Someone from London with news about a deal I thought had fallen through. Amara studied his face with the intensity that always made him feel like she could read his thoughts. "Raphael, you're lying to me. I can see it in your eyes. What's wrong?" For a moment, he considered telling her everything. About Isabella's call, about the impossible request, about the way hearing his dead fiancée's voice had shaken every certainty he thought he possessed. But looking at Amara's trusting face, seeing the love and concern in her eyes, he couldn't bring himself to shatter her peace with the chaos that was consuming him. "It's nothing I can't handle," he said instead, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Just some complications with international contracts. Nothing for you to worry about." "Are you sure?" Amara asked, her thumb tracing the line of tension in his jaw. "Because if something's bothering you, I want to help. That's what partners do. We face problems together." "I'm sure," Raphael lied, hating himself for the deception, but unable to find another path through the minefield that had suddenly appeared in his perfect life. "Go back to bed. I'll be there in a few minutes." Amara kissed him softly, a gesture of trust and love that made his chest ache with guilt, then padded back toward the bedroom. Raphael waited until he heard her settle back into bed, before pulling out his phone and staring at Isabella's number. The next morning brought no clarity, only the crushing weight of a decision that felt impossible to make. Raphael went through the motions of his normal routine, coffee, workout, reviewing contracts, but his mind was entirely consumed by Isabella's request and the questions it raised about his relationship with Amara. "If I told you that I needed to resolve something with someone from my past," Raphael said carefully over breakfast, "something that might help me be a better husband to you, would you trust me to handle it?" Amara reached across the table and took his hand, her thumb stroking across his knuckles with the gentle touch that always made him feel both cherished and safe. "I would trust you with my life, Raphael, but I'd also want to understand what I was trusting you to do." "I can't give you details yet," Raphael said, hating every word but unable to find a better path forward. "But I need you to know that whatever I do, it will be because I love you completely and want to marry you with no doubts, no regrets, and no unfinished business casting shadows over our future. "You're scaring me," Amara said softly. "The way you're talking sounds like you're saying goodbye." "I'm not saying goodbye," Raphael assured her, bringing her hand to his lips to press a gentle kiss to her palm. "I'm saying that I want to be the man you deserve, and there's something I need to do to make sure I can be that for you." "What kind of something?" Raphael looked into her trusting eyes and felt his heart shatter. "I need to see Isabella." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Amara went completely still, her face cycling through confusion, understanding, and finally a pain so deep that Raphael immediately wished he could take the words back. "Isabella," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your fiancée, who died 2 years ago." "She's not dead," Raphael said quietly. "She called me last night. She's alive, and she's getting married in 4 days, and she wants to see me, for closure." "Closure," Amara repeated, and Raphael could see her artist's mind processing the implications, understanding the subtext he hadn't explicitly stated. "She wants one night," Raphael continued, each word feeling like he was swallowing glass, "to say goodbye properly before we both marry other people. And you want to go." It wasn't a question, and Raphael realized that Amara had seen the truth in his expression before he had fully acknowledged it himself. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I thought I had moved on completely, that what I felt for you had healed everything her death broke in me. But hearing her voice, it brought back questions I thought I had answered." "What kind of questions?" "Whether I fell in love with you because you were the right woman for me, or because you were the woman who helped me feel human again after losing her. Whether what we have is real love or just recovery." The words were brutal in their honesty, but Raphael knew that Amara deserved the truth, even if it destroyed them both. He watched her face as she processed what he was saying, saw the moment when understanding fully dawned. "So you want to spend one last night with the woman you thought was dead to make sure that marrying me isn't just a way of avoiding dealing with your grief over her," Amara said, her voice steady despite the tears that were beginning to gather in her eyes. "I want to be sure," Raphael said desperately. "I want to marry you knowing that I'm choosing you completely, not just hiding from the past. And if seeing her makes you realize that you're not over her, if you discover that what you feel for me isn't strong enough to compete with what you felt for her, then I'll know the truth," Raphael said quietly. "And you'll deserve better than a man who could never love you the way you deserve to be loved." Amara stood from the table with movements that seemed unnaturally controlled, as if she were operating her body through sheer force of will. "If you need to do this," she said, her voice breaking, "then do it. But Raphael, if you walk out that door to spend the night with another woman 2 days before our wedding, don't expect me to be here when you come back." "Amara." "No," she interrupted, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "If you love me, if you really love me, then the fact that some other woman is asking you to betray that love should make the choice obvious. The fact that you're even considering it tells me everything I need to know about how you really feel." She walked toward the bedroom, then paused in the doorway without turning around. "I love you enough to let you go if that's what you need to be happy, but I love myself too much to wait around while you decide whether I'm worth choosing." The sound of the bedroom door closing behind her was the loudest sound Raphael had ever heard. He sat alone at the breakfast table, surrounded by the remnants of their perfect morning, and realized that he was about to make the most important decision of his life. In 3 hours, he would either walk away from the woman who had taught him how to love, or he would call Isabella and tell her that some ghosts were meant to stay buried. The future he chose would determine not just his own happiness, but whether love was strong enough to survive the weight of the past. Chapter 6. The Night of Truth. The luxury suite at the Plaza Hotel had witnessed countless reunions, but none quite like the one where a man discovered that resurrection could be more devastating than death ever was. The elevator to the 15th floor of the Plaza Hotel felt like a journey into purgatory, each ascending number marking Raphael Stone's descent into a choice that would either save his future or destroy it completely. In his jacket pocket, his phone buzzed with another unanswered call from Amara, the 7th since he had walked out of their penthouse 4 hours ago, leaving behind the woman who loved him and the life they had built together. He hadn't answered any of her calls. How could he? What words existed to explain that he was on his way to meet the ghost of his first love, while the woman he planned to marry sat alone in their apartment, wondering if she would ever see him again? The hallway stretched before him like a gauntlet, each step bringing him closer to suite 1547, where Isabella Cross waited with answers to questions he had spent 2 years trying to forget. Raphael's reflection in the gold-framed mirrors showed a man who looked like he was walking to his own execution, pale, hollow-eyed, wearing the expression of someone who had already lost everything that mattered. He knocked on the door with trembling hands, and when it opened, Raphael felt the last 2 years of healing collapse like a house of cards in a hurricane. Isabella Cross stood before him, like a vision from a dream he had never fully awakened from. At 30, she remained breathtakingly beautiful in the way that certain women seem to exist outside the normal rules of time and gravity. Her platinum blonde hair fell in perfect waves around her shoulders, her emerald green eyes held depths that had once made him willing to drown, and her red lips curved in the same smile that had convinced him to propose after only 6 months of dating. She wore a simple black dress that managed to be both elegant and devastating, paired with the diamond earrings he had given her for their first anniversary, earrings he had assumed were buried with her body in Woodlawn Cemetery. "Hello, Raphael," she said softly, her British accent wrapping around his name like silk around a blade. "Thank you for coming." "Isabella." He stood frozen in the doorway, unable to reconcile the living woman before him with the grave he had visited, the funeral he had attended, the 2 years of grief that had nearly destroyed him. "You look exactly the same." "Time stopped for me the day I left," she replied, stepping aside to let him enter the suite. "I've been frozen in the moment I realized I was making the biggest mistake of my life." The suite was decorated with impeccable taste. Cream walls, antique furniture, fresh white roses that filled the air with their intoxicating fragrance. But Raphael barely noticed the luxury, too focused on the impossibility of Isabella's presence, the way her mere existence rewrote every truth he thought he understood about love, loss, and moving forward. "How?" he asked, the single word containing every question that had tormented him since her phone call. "How are you alive? Whose body did I identify? How could you let me believe you were dead?" Isabella moved to the suite's wet bar and poured 2 glasses of aged whiskey, Macallan 25, the same brand they used to drink during late-night conversations about their future together. Her hands, Raphael noticed, shook slightly as she handed him the glass. "The woman who died was named Catherine Mills," Isabella said quietly. "She was homeless, addicted to drugs, and unfortunately bore enough resemblance to me that when her body was found in my burned car, the police didn't look too closely at the identification." "You killed an innocent woman to fake your death?" "No!" Isabella's voice cracked with what sounded like genuine horror. "Catherine died of an overdose in an alley behind the hotel where I was hiding. I found her body, and I saw an opportunity to disappear before the people who wanted me dead found me." "What people? What had you done that was so terrible you needed to die to escape it?" Isabella drained her whiskey in one swallow, the liquor giving her courage to confess sins that had haunted her for 2 years. "I had gambling debts, serious ones, to the kind of people who don't accept payment plans or negotiate terms. They wanted $2 million, Raphael, and they wanted it immediately. Why didn't you come to me? I would have paid anything to protect you." "Because I was ashamed," Isabella whispered, tears beginning to flow down her perfect cheeks. "Because I had hidden my addiction from you for months, lied about where I went and what I did when you weren't around, because I knew that if you discovered the truth about who I really was, you would leave me. So instead, you chose to fake your death and let me think I had lost you forever. I thought it would be easier for you to grieve a dead fiancé than to hate a living one who had betrayed your trust." Raphael set down his untouched whiskey and moved to the suite's floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at Central Park, where he and Amara had planned to hold their wedding ceremony in 2 days. "Do you have any idea what your death did to me, Isabella? Do you understand that I spent 2 years believing that love was a curse, that everyone I cared about was destined to die?" "I know," Isabella said, approaching him with the careful movements of someone approaching a wounded animal. "And I'm so sorry. If I could take back the pain I caused you, I would. But Raphael, I need you to understand, leaving you was the hardest thing I've ever done. But you did it anyway, because I loved you too much to destroy your life with my mistakes." Isabella's hand touched his shoulder, and Raphael felt an electric shock of recognition, his body remembering what his mind had tried to forget. "But these past 2 years, living without you has been a kind of death anyway." Raphael turned to face her, and the pain in her emerald eyes looked genuine, devastating, completely authentic. "You said you're getting married to someone else." "To a man who can offer me security but not love," Isabella confirmed. "To someone who knows about my past and is willing to overlook it in exchange for a wife who looks good at charity galas and doesn't ask questions about his business dealings." "Then why are you marrying him?" "Because I thought you were lost to me forever. Because when I finally got clean and safe enough to contact you, I discovered that you had moved on, that you had found someone else." "Amara isn't someone else," Raphael said firmly, though his voice carried less conviction than he wished. "She's the woman I'm going to marry, the woman I love." "Do you?" Isabella asked, moving closer until he could smell her perfume. The same Chanel No. 5 things used to drive him wild with desire. "Or is she just the woman who helped you feel human again after I broke your heart?" The question hit like a physical blow because it echoed the doubts that had been tormenting him since Isabella's phone call. "What we have is real, Isabella. It's built on honesty and trust and it's safe," Isabella interrupted. "Amara is safe, predictable, the kind of woman who will never surprise you or challenge you or make you feel like you might die from wanting her too much." "There's nothing wrong with safe." "No, there isn't. But there's also nothing transcendent about it." Isabella stepped closer, close enough that Raphael could see the gold flecks in her green eyes. "Do you remember what it felt like to love me, Raphael? The way it consumed everything else, made the rest of the world fade away until there was nothing but us." Raphael's breath caught as memories flooded back. Nights when they had made love until sunrise, conversations that lasted for hours without either of them noticing the passage of time, the way Isabella had looked at him like he was her entire universe. What he had shared with Isabella had been intoxicating, addictive, the kind of love that people wrote songs about and died for. What he shared with Amara was different, calmer, steadier, built on mutual respect and genuine friendship rather than obsessive passion. But was that enough? Was love supposed to be safe and comfortable, or was it supposed to be the kind of force that could destroy you if you weren't careful? "I remember," he admitted quietly. "But I also remember the fights, the jealousy, the way we brought out the worst in each other as often as we brought out the best." "Passion has a price," Isabella acknowledged. "But isn't that better than settling for something that feels more like friendship than romance?" "What Amara and I have isn't friendship," Raphael protested. It's love, real love, the kind that makes you want to be better than you are. Then why are you here? Isabella asked, her hand coming up to touch his face. If what you have with her is so perfect, so real, so complete, why did you leave her alone 2 days before your wedding to come see me? The question hung in the air like a trap, and Raphael realized he didn't have a good answer. Why was he here? If he truly loved Amara with the completeness he claimed, wouldn't the choice between them be obvious? Because I needed to be sure, he said finally, because I owe her honesty about what I'm feeling, even if those feelings are confused. And what are you feeling? Isabella asked, stepping close enough that their bodies were almost touching. I don't know, Raphael admitted, the confession tearing from his chest like a physical wound. When I heard your voice, when I realized you were alive, it brought back everything I thought I had processed and moved past. And now I don't know if what I feel for Amara is real love, or just the refuge I found from my grief over losing you. Isabella's eyes filled with tears that looked like diamonds in the sweet, soft lighting. I came back from the dead for you, Raphael. I risked everything to tell you the truth because I realized that some loves are worth any price, worth any risk. Isabella, one night, she whispered, her lips now inches from his. Give me one night to remind you what we had together. If tomorrow morning you still want to marry Amara, I'll disappear again, and you'll never see me again. But if you remember why you fell in love with me in the first place, then what? Then we'll find a way to build the life we were supposed to have before my mistakes destroyed everything. Raphael closed his eyes, feeling the weight of an impossible choice pressing down on him like a physical force. In his pocket, his phone buzzed again, another call from Amara that he couldn't bring himself to answer. How could he tell the woman, who trusted him completely, that he was standing in a hotel suite with his supposedly dead ex-fiancée, contemplating betraying everything they had built together? I can't, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. You can, Isabella whispered, her hand sliding up to tangle in his hair. We can. Just for tonight, we can pretend that the last 2 years never happened, that we never lost each other. When she kissed him, Raphael felt his carefully constructed new life shatter like glass. Isabella's lips were soft and familiar, her touch awakening muscle memories that his body had never forgotten. For a moment, just a moment, he kissed her back, lost in the intoxicating pull of their shared history. But then he thought of Amara, sitting alone in their apartment, probably staring at her wedding dress and wondering if the man she loved was going to come home. He thought of the trust in her eyes when she had agreed to let him resolve his past, the way she had believed in their love, even when he was doubting it himself. No, Raphael said, pulling away from Isabella with movements that felt like tearing off his own skin. I can't do this to her. I won't. Raphael, please. I loved you, Isabella. For 1.5 years I loved you with everything I had. But that man died the night you did. The man who loves Amara is who I became after I learned to live with losing you. But I'm not lost, Isabella said desperately. I'm right here. We can have everything back. No, we can't. Because even if I wanted to, and I'm not sure I do, what we had was built on lies and secrets and the kind of passion that burns everything around it. What I have with Amara is built on truth, even if that truth is that you're not sure you love her enough. Raphael paused, the question cutting to the heart of his confusion. I am sure, he said finally, the words feeling like a revelation as he spoke them. I love her completely, not because she's safe or convenient or a refuge from grief, but because she made me want to be the kind of man who deserves to be loved. And I didn't? You made me want to possess you, Raphael said gently. Amara makes me want to treasure her. There's a difference. Isabella's face crumpled as the reality of his rejection hit her. So this is goodbye? Really goodbye this time? This is goodbye, Raphael confirmed, though saying the words felt like closing a door on an entire chapter of his life. I hope you find happiness, Isabella. Real happiness, not just the kind of passion that feels like dying. And I hope she deserves you, Isabella replied, tears streaming down her face. I hope she understands what a gift it is to be loved by someone who would walk away from his past to protect her future. Raphael moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. For what it's worth, I forgive you, for all of it. You did what you thought was best at the time. Thank you, Isabella whispered. That means more than you know. As Raphael walked away from Suite 1547, leaving behind the ghost of his first love and the what-ifs that had haunted him for 2 years, he felt something fundamental shift in his chest. The questions that had driven him to this hotel room were finally answered, not because he had discovered some truth about his feelings for Amara, but because he had remembered what love was supposed to feel like. Love wasn't obsession or possession or the kind of passion that consumed everything in its path. Love was choosing someone's happiness over your own doubt, their peace over your confusion, their future over your past. Love was Amara, waiting for him at home, trusting him to make the right choice, even when he wasn't sure what that choice should be. As Raphael's taxi sped through the Manhattan streets toward home, toward Amara, toward the life he had almost sacrificed, he realized that some questions could only be answered by living the answers. And the answer to whether he loved Amara enough to marry her was simple. He loved her enough to walk away from anything that threatened their happiness, including his own uncertainty. The only question now was whether she would forgive him for needing to learn that lesson the hard way. Chapter 7. Shattered Trust. The empty penthouse that greeted Raphael Stone at 2:47 a.m. spoke louder than any words could. Some betrayals echo so loudly that even silence becomes deafening. The elevator to the penthouse moved in slow motion, each floor a countdown to either redemption or devastation. Raphael's heart hammered as he fumbled with his keys, hands shaking not from October cold, but from terror of what he might find, or more accurately, what he might not find, when he opened the door to the life he had almost thrown away. "Amara!" he called as he stepped into the foyer, his voice echoing in the vast space that suddenly felt more like a mausoleum than a home. "Amara, I'm back. I need to talk to you." The silence that answered was devastating in its completeness. No rustle from the bedroom, no soft humming from the kitchen, no gentle sound of pages turning as she read while waiting. Just the accusatory tick of the antique clock and the distant hum of the city far below. Raphael moved through their home with desperate urgency, searching for evidence that his entire future hadn't just evaporated. The bedroom held traces of her presence, but no Amara. Her pillow still bore the indent of her head, reading glasses sat folded on the nightstand, and the faint scent of lavender shampoo lingered like a ghost. But the closet told the story he had been dreading. The section where her clothes usually hung showed gaps like missing teeth, and the suitcase that normally lived on the top shelf was gone. Her easel, which had stood by the window where morning light was perfect for painting, had vanished along with her paints, brushes, and the half-finished canvas, a piece she had called Forever Begins Tomorrow and planned to give him as a wedding gift. On the kitchen island, weighed down by the crystal paperweight he had bought her in Venice, lay a single sheet of paper covered in Amara's distinctive handwriting. Raphael's hands trembled as he unfolded what felt like his own death warrant. "My dearest Raphael, I'm writing this because I need you to understand that leaving isn't about punishment or revenge. It's about self-preservation. When you walked out tonight to spend time with Isabella, you didn't just betray our relationship. You taught me something about the kind of love I deserve. I won't pretend your choice doesn't break my heart. For the past months, I believed what we had was unshakable, that our love was strong enough to weather any storm. But your decision to meet with another woman 2 days before our wedding has shown me that I was building my forever on foundations that were never as solid as I believed. I'm not angry with you for having unresolved feelings about Isabella. Grief is complicated, and learning that someone you mourned is actually alive would shake anyone to their core. What breaks my heart is that when faced with the choice between protecting our love and exploring your past, you chose the past. You said you needed to be sure about your feelings for me. The fact that you weren't already sure, after months of planning a life together, after proposing marriage, after promising me forever, tells me everything I need to know about where I really stand in your heart. I love you enough to want you to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include me. But I love myself too much to wait around while you decide whether I'm worth choosing. I deserve someone who chooses me first, completely, without reservation or the need for comparison shopping among the women in his past. Please don't try to find me. I need time to heal from this, and seeing you will only make that process harder. If what we had was real, if your feelings for me are as strong as you claimed, then you'll understand that the kindest thing you can do is give me space to rebuild my heart. I'm sorry our story has to end this way. I'm sorry that love wasn't enough to make you sure about us. Most of all, I'm sorry that I won't be there tomorrow morning to see you in your wedding tuxedo, because even heartbroken, I think you would have been the most beautiful groom who ever lived. Be well, Raphael. Be happy. Be certain about whoever you choose to love next. Forever yours, even if not in the way we planned. Amara. I left your ring on the dresser. It deserves to belong to someone you never have to question your feelings about. Raphael read the letter 3 times before the words fully penetrated his consciousness, each reading making the reality of his loss more devastating. Amara was gone. The woman who had taught him how to love, how to be vulnerable, how to choose hope over fear. She was gone because he had been too confused about his own heart to recognize what he was risking. He found the engagement ring exactly where she said it would be, sitting on his dresser like an accusation. The cognac diamond that had taken weeks to source, the setting designed specifically for her hand, the symbol of a future they would never share. It all seemed meaningless now, expensive metal and stone that had lost its purpose along with its intended owner. Raphael sank onto the bed they had shared, head in his hands, trying to process the magnitude of what he had done. In seeking certainty about his feelings, he had destroyed the very relationship those feelings were supposed to protect. In trying to be honest about his doubts, he had proved to the woman he loved that his love wasn't strong enough to overcome those doubts. The worst part was that he finally understood with crystal clarity exactly how he felt about Amara. Sitting in their empty bedroom, surrounded by the absence of her presence, he knew without question that she was the love of his life. Not because she was safe or convenient or a refuge from grief over Isabella, but because she was the person who made him want to be better than he was. Isabella had been right about one thing. What he and Amara shared was different from the consuming passion he had experienced with his ex-fiancée, but she had been wrong about it being lesser. What he felt for Amara was deeper, truer, more sustainable than anything he had experienced before. It was the kind of love that built lives rather than burning them down, that created rather than consumed, and he had thrown it away for the sake of a ghost. His phone buzzed with a text message, and for a moment his heart leaped with hope that it was Amara, that she had changed her mind, that there was still a chance to salvage what they had built together. Instead, the message was from his wedding planner, confirming final details for a ceremony that would never happen. The next morning brought a parade of vendors and service providers who needed to be told that the wedding was off, guests who needed to be contacted with devastating news, deposits that would be forfeited, and explanations that Raphael found impossible to give. How could he tell people that he had destroyed his engagement because he needed to make sure he really loved his fiancée? His assistant, Maria, handled most of the logistics with professional discretion that had made her invaluable over the years. But even she couldn't hide her disappointment when she delivered news that the botanical garden venue had been successfully cancelled. "Sir," she said carefully, "if you don't mind me asking, is there any chance this is temporary?" Miss Wells seemed so happy when I spoke with her last week about final details. "It's not temporary," Raphael said quietly. "I made a mistake that can't be undone. Mistakes can usually be fixed, sir, especially when both people want to fix them." "She doesn't want to fix this one," Raphael replied, the words tasting like ashes. "And I don't blame her." 3 days passed. 3 days that should have included a rehearsal dinner, a wedding ceremony, and the beginning of their honeymoon in Tuscany. Instead, Raphael found himself alone in the penthouse, surrounded by wedding gifts that would need to be returned and flower arrangements already wilting in their vases. He tried calling Amara 17 times over those 3 days. Each call went straight to voicemail, and each voicemail he left was more desperate than the last. He begged her to let him explain, promised that his meeting with Isabella had only proved how much he loved her, swore that he would spend the rest of his life making up for his moment of doubt. But there was no response. Amara had disappeared as completely as if she had never existed, taking with her every trace of the warmth and life she had brought to his world. On what should have been their wedding night, Raphael sat in his art studio, the room where Amara had convinced him to start painting again, and stared at the canvas he had been working on before everything fell apart. It was a portrait of her, painted from memory during weeks when he couldn't bear to be away from her long enough to sketch her properly. In the painting, she was laughing, her head thrown back with pure joy, and seeing it now made Raphael's chest ache with the weight of what he had lost. He had gained closure with Isabella and lost everything that actually mattered. He had answered his questions about the past and destroyed his future in the process. He had chosen certainty over trust, doubt over faith, and in doing so had proved that Amara was right to leave him. But as Raphael picked up his paintbrush for the first time in weeks, as he began to add new layers to the portrait of the woman he loved, he made himself a promise. He would find a way to win her back. He would prove to her that his love was stronger than his doubts, that his commitment to their future was more powerful than his confusion about his past. He would show her that some mistakes, even devastating ones, could be forgiven if the love behind them was real enough, strong enough, and willing to fight for a second chance. The question was whether Amara would ever be willing to give him that chance, or whether some betrayals were too deep to heal, even with all the love in the world. Chapter 8. Love Lost. 7 weeks after Amara Wells vanished from his life, Raphael Stone finally understood that some kinds of pain were designed to reshape the soul, and some loves were worth crossing any distance to reclaim. The small town of Millbrook, Vermont, looked like something from a postcard, with maple trees blazing orange and red against the October sky, its main street lined with boutiques selling hand-knitted scarves and locally made honey, and residents who still waved to strangers and held doors open for each other. It was exactly the kind of place that Raphael Stone, with his Manhattan sensibilities and corporate ruthlessness, should have found quaint to the point of suffocation. Instead, standing on the sidewalk outside the Millbrook Community Arts Center, watching through large windows as Amara taught a painting class to enthusiastic children, Raphael felt like he was looking at paradise from the wrong side of the gates. She looked different, thinner, as if grief had carved away everything non-essential and left only the pure essence of who she was. Her hair was shorter, cut into a bob that framed her face and made her eyes look larger, more luminous. She wore simple clothes, jeans and a paint-splattered sweater, but she moved with the same graceful confidence that had first caught his attention in the coffee shop 7 months ago. Most importantly, she looked peaceful. Not happy exactly, but settled in a way that suggested she was rebuilding her life from the ground up and finding satisfaction in the process. Raphael should have been glad to see her healing. Instead, her apparent contentment without him felt like a knife between his ribs. "She's remarkable with the children," said a voice behind him, and Raphael turned to see an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes watching him with obvious curiosity. "Are you a friend of Miss Wells?" "I was," Raphael replied carefully. "I'm from her past." "Ah," the woman said with the knowing tone of someone who had lived long enough to recognize heartbreak in all its forms. "I'm Dorothy Chen. I run the bed and breakfast where Amara is staying, and you're the young man who broke her heart." It wasn't a question, and Raphael felt heat creep up his neck at being so easily identified. "How did you—" "Because she cries in her sleep," Dorothy said matter-of-factly, "and because she paints the same man's face over and over again, even though she probably doesn't realize she's doing it." Raphael looked back through the window, watching as Amara knelt beside a little girl, struggling with her brushstrokes, her patient encouragement evident, even though he couldn't hear her words. "Is she happy here?" "She's healing," Dorothy replied. "There's a difference. Happy will come later when she's ready for it." "I need to see her," Raphael said quietly. "I need to tell her that I made a mistake, that I know now what I should have known then." "And what's that?" "That love isn't about being certain of your feelings. It's about being certain of your choice to keep choosing the same person, even when your feelings are complicated." Dorothy studied his face with the intensity of someone deciding whether he was worth the risk. "She finishes with the children in 20 minutes, she said finally. "After that, she usually walks to Miller's Pond to paint the sunset, quarter-mile down Maple Street, then left on the dirt path." "Thank you," Raphael said, surprised by kindness from a stranger who had every reason to protect Amara from further hurt. "Don't thank me yet," Dorothy warned. "Thank me if you manage to say the right words when you see her." 25 minutes later, Raphael found Amara exactly where Dorothy said she would be, sitting on a fallen log beside a small pond that reflected the autumn sky like a mirror. Her easel was set up in front of her, and she was painting the scene with focused intensity he remembered, her hand moving across the canvas with sure, confident strokes. She sensed his presence before he spoke, her hand stilling mid-brushstroke, her shoulders tensing with awareness that someone was watching her. When she turned around, the expression that crossed her face was complex: surprise, pain, a flash of what might have been joy, and then careful blankness, more devastating than anger would have been. "Raphael," she said quietly, setting down her brush and standing to face him fully. "How did you find me?" "I hired private investigators," he admitted. "I've been searching for you for 7 weeks. I asked you not to look for me." "I know. I couldn't help myself." Raphael took a tentative step closer, encouraged when she didn't back away. "You look good, peaceful." "I'm getting there," Amara replied, her voice carefully neutral. "It's a good place to start over. The people here are kind, and there's enough natural beauty to keep me painting for years." "Is that what you're doing? Starting over?" "What else would I be doing? Waiting for me to prove that I deserve a second chance?" The words hung between them like a bridge over dangerous water. Amara's careful composure cracked slightly, revealing glimpses of the pain she was working so hard to heal. "You can't just show up here and expect everything to go back to the way it was," she said, her voice beginning to shake. "You made your choice, Raphael. You chose uncertainty over commitment, the past over the future." "No," Raphael said firmly, taking another step closer. "I chose badly, and I chose from a place of confusion and fear. But I didn't choose Isabella. I realized, sitting in that hotel room with her, that what I felt for her was nostalgia for who I used to be. What I feel for you is excitement about who I could become." "Pretty words," Amara said, but her tone suggested she found them inadequate. "But words are easy, Raphael. Trust is hard, and you broke mine so completely that I'm not sure it can be repaired. Then let me try to earn it back, Raphael pleaded. Let me show you that what we had was worth fighting for. What we had is gone, Amara said, turning back toward her easel, as if the conversation was over. It died the night you walked out to meet another woman, instead of choosing to trust what we'd built together. I was scared, Raphael admitted, the confession tearing from his chest like a physical wound. I was terrified that I was repeating patterns, that I was using you to avoid dealing with my grief over Isabella. I thought I owed you certainty about my feelings. What you owed me was faith in our love, Amara replied without turning around. You owed me the benefit of believing that what we felt for each other was real, strong enough to withstand questions and doubts. You're right, Raphael said simply. You're absolutely right. I should have talked to you about my doubts instead of acting on them. I should have trusted that our love was strong enough to handle my confusion about the past. But you didn't. But I didn't, Raphael agreed, and I lost the most important thing in my life because of it. Amara began packing up her painting supplies with movements that were too controlled, too precise. You should go back to New York, Raphael. Back to your life, your empire, your world. Find someone who can give you the kind of certainty you need. I don't want certainty, Raphael said desperately. I want you. Confused, doubtful, scared. I want you anyway. I want the chance to choose you every day, even on the days when choosing feels hard. And what about the next time your past shows up to complicate your present? What about the next time you have questions about your feelings? Will you run away again to find answers, or will you stay and work through the confusion with me? The question cut to the heart of everything, and Raphael knew that his answer would determine whether there was any possibility of rebuilding what they had lost. I will stay, he said quietly. I will choose you and us and our future over any ghost from my past. I will choose you even when I'm scared, even when I'm confused, even when choosing you feels like the hardest thing I've ever done. Amara finished packing her supplies and shouldered her easel, finally turning to face him fully. It's too late, Raphael. I've started building a life here. I have students who depend on me, friends who care about me, a routine that gives me peace. I can't go back to wondering if I'm enough for you. You were always enough, Raphael said, his voice breaking. You were everything. I was just too broken to see it clearly. Then I hope you find someone who can love your broken pieces, Amara said sadly. But it can't be me. I can't spend my life being compared to ghosts or competing with the past for your attention. She began walking back toward town, and Raphael felt panic rise in his chest at the realization that she was walking away from him again, possibly forever this time. Amara, wait, he called, jogging to catch up with her. Just let me ask you one question. She stopped but didn't turn around. What? Do you still love me? The question hung in the autumn air like a prayer, and Raphael held his breath while he waited for an answer that would either save his life or end it completely. Yes, Amara whispered, so quietly he almost didn't hear her. God help me. Yes. I still love you. Then fight for us, Raphael pleaded. Don't let my mistake be the end of our story. Let it be the thing that taught us both how much we're willing to sacrifice to be together. Love isn't enough, Amara said, finally turning to face him with tears streaming down her cheeks. Love without trust is just beautiful pain. And I can't live with beautiful pain anymore, Raphael. I need beautiful joy, beautiful peace, beautiful certainty that I'm chosen completely. Then let me give you those things, Raphael said, stepping closer until they were inches apart. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that you are my first choice, my only choice, my forever choice. How? Amara asked, her voice breaking. How do I trust you again? Because I'm not leaving, Raphael said firmly. I'm not going back to New York without you. I'm staying here, in this town, for as long as it takes to prove that my love for you is stronger than any fear, any doubt, any ghost from my past. Raphael, I've already put my company up for sale, he continued. I've liquidated my assets, simplified my life down to what actually matters. I'm not the same man who walked away from you 7 weeks ago. I'm the man who learned that love isn't about having all the answers, it's about being willing to find them together. Amara stared at him, her eyes wide with shock. You sold your company. I'm in the process of selling it, yes. I kept enough to be comfortable, but I don't need an empire anymore. I just need you. But your life's work, my life's work is loving you, Raphael interrupted. Everything else is just how I pay the bills. They stood there in the fading light of the Vermont sunset. Two people who had built something beautiful together, destroyed it through fear and misunderstanding, and now faced the question of whether love could truly conquer the damage they had inflicted on each other. I need time, Amara said finally. I need to know that this isn't just guilt or desperation talking. I need to see that you can be happy with a simpler life, that you can find fulfillment in choosing love over achievement. How much time? Raphael asked. I don't know, Amara admitted. Maybe a lot, maybe forever. I can't promise you anything except that I'm willing to let you try to earn back what we lost. That's all I need, Raphael said, relief flooding through him like warm water. The chance to try. As they walked back toward town together, not touching, not talking, but sharing the same path, Raphael understood that he had been given the rarest of gifts, a second chance to get love right. Whether he succeeded or failed would depend not on the strength of his feelings, but on his willingness to choose Amara every day in ways both large and small, until choosing her became as natural as breathing. Chapter 9. The Hunt for Forgiveness. 4 months into Raphael Stone's exile in Millbrook, Vermont, he discovered that earning forgiveness was like learning to paint. Every brushstroke mattered, every mistake was visible, and sometimes you had to destroy your masterpiece to create something true. The cottage Raphael rented on Elm Street was nothing like the penthouse he had called home for 8 years. The ceiling leaked when it rained, the heating system made mysterious clanking sounds, and the bathroom was so small he had to duck to avoid hitting his head. By every measure of success he had once valued, it was a dramatic step backward, a billion-dollar lifestyle exchanged for a modest rental. But as Raphael sat at the kitchen table on a snowy December morning, watching through frost-covered windows as Amara walked past on her way to the art center, he had never felt richer. Every morning brought him the gift of seeing the woman he loved, even if she still couldn't bear to speak to him for longer than necessary. The past 4 months had been a masterclass in patience, humility, and the slow art of rebuilding trust one gesture at a time. Raphael had learned that earning forgiveness wasn't a dramatic gesture or grand romantic declaration. It was showing up every day, proving through actions rather than words that he had fundamentally changed. He had started by volunteering at the Arts Center, offering to help with maintenance and repairs the small non-profit couldn't afford. The first time he appeared with a toolbox, Amara had fled to the supply closet and refused to come out until he left. But gradually, she had begun to tolerate his presence, then to appreciate the improvements he was making. Raphael had also begun taking art classes from Eleanor Hartwell, a retired professor who had moved to Millbrook for its artistic community. Under Eleanor's patient guidance, Raphael had rediscovered the joy of creating something with his hands, of expressing emotions through color and texture rather than quarterly reports. His paintings were terrible at first, clumsy attempts at capturing Vermont's beauty, but gradually his work began showing flashes of genuine talent. More importantly, painting had become his meditation, the way he processed emotions and worked through rebuilding his relationship with himself. The hardest part was seeing Amara every day, watching her laugh with students and chat with shopkeepers, knowing he had forfeited his place in her life through his own choices. She was polite when they encountered each other, cordial but distant, a protective barrier built around her heart. "Good morning, Raphael," she would say when they passed on the street, her voice pleasant but neutral. "Good morning, Amara," he would reply, treasuring even these brief moments. Sometimes she would pause to ask about his latest painting or mention something about his volunteer work. These conversations never lasted more than minutes, but Raphael stored every word, every smile, every moment when her guard dropped enough for him to glimpse the woman he had fallen in love with. The real test came on a bitter February morning when Raphael arrived at the arts center to find Amara standing outside in the snow, staring at the building with pure devastation. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately moving to her side. "Water pipe burst in the main studio," she said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Everything is ruined. The paintings the kids have been working on all winter, the supplies, it's all destroyed." Raphael looked through the window and saw the extent of damage. Inches of water covered the floor, paintings floated like lily pads, and everything that made the space magical for children was soaked beyond repair. "Insurance?" he asked. "Minimal coverage," Amara replied. "This is a small non-profit. We don't have money for comprehensive policies. This might be the end of the program." Without thinking, Raphael pulled out his phone and began making calls. First to a water damage restoration company, then to an art supply store, then to a contractor. "What are you doing?" Amara asked, watching him coordinate with efficiency that had once made him a formidable businessman. "Fixing this," Raphael replied simply. "The restoration team will be here in 2 hours. New supplies will arrive tomorrow. The contractor will work through the weekend." "Raphael, we can't afford—" "You're not paying for it," Raphael interrupted. "I am." "That's too much," Amara protested. "It's not charity," Raphael said, meeting her eyes directly for the first time in months. "It's an investment in something that matters to you, which makes it matter to me." For a moment, Amara's composure cracked, and Raphael saw tears gathering. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Because these kids need this place. Because art saved my life when I was drowning in grief. Because you've built something beautiful here, and I can't stand to see it destroyed. And because you're trying to win me back," Amara added, not accusatory, but stating fact. "That too," Raphael admitted. "But even if you never forgive me, I would still want to save this place. Some things are worth preserving regardless of what they might get you in return." The restoration took 3 days. Raphael worked alongside professionals, mopping water, moving furniture, coordinating repairs with the focus that had once built an empire. He didn't ask for thanks or use the crisis to force conversations. He simply worked until the art center was not just restored, but improved. The breakthrough came 2 weeks later, during the reopening celebration. The entire town had turned out, and Raphael found himself standing awkwardly by the refreshment table, uncertain of his place in the community he was trying to join. "Mr. Stone?" a small voice said behind him. He turned to see Emma, one of Amara's youngest students, looking up at him with serious 7-year-old eyes. "Hi, Emma," Raphael said, kneeling to her level. "Miss Amara says you fixed everything when it got broken," Emma said. "I made something for you." She produced a drawing, a man and woman standing together in front of an easel, both holding paintbrushes. The figures were rendered in distinctive childhood art style, but what took Raphael's breath away was the care with which Emma had positioned the figures close together, the smile she had given both faces. "This is beautiful, Emma," Raphael said, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you going to paint together again?" Emma asked matter-of-factly. Raphael looked across the room to where Amara stood. As if sensing his gaze, she turned toward him, and for a moment their eyes met. She saw him holding Emma's drawing, saw the tears in his eyes, and her expression softened in a way it hadn't in months. "I hope so," Raphael told Emma honestly. Later that evening, as volunteers cleaned up, Raphael found himself alone with Amara for the first time since their encounter by Miller's Pond. "Emma's drawing," Amara said quietly. "She's very talented," Raphael replied. "You're a good teacher. She asked me about you, about why you live here, but we don't talk much." "What did you tell her?" "That sometimes people who care about each other need time to figure out how to care about each other better." Raphael looked down at the drawing. "Is that what we're doing?" "I don't know," Amara admitted. "I see you here every day, working, becoming part of this community. I see you learning to paint again, helping people without expecting anything in return. And sometimes I think maybe people can change, maybe mistakes can be lessons instead of just endings." "I have changed," Raphael said quietly. "Not just my circumstances, but who I am at my core. I've learned that love is about showing up, choosing someone every day, believing in their worth even when they doubt it themselves." "And you're showing up," Amara observed. "I'm showing up," Raphael confirmed. "For you, for this community, for the man I want to be, and I'll keep showing up for as long as it takes." They stood together in the quiet art center, surrounded by paintings and projects that represented hope and possibility. The moment felt fragile, precious, like the first green shoot pushing through snow. "I'm still scared," Amara said softly. "Scared of trusting you again, scared of believing this version of you is permanent." "I'm scared too," Raphael admitted. "But I'm more scared of giving up on us without fighting for what we could be together." "So what do we do with all that fear?" "We acknowledge it," Raphael said. "We respect it, and then we decide whether we're brave enough to love each other anyway." Amara looked at him for a long moment. "I need more time," she said finally. "But Raphael, for the first time in months, I think there might be a path back to each other. A different path, but maybe a stronger one." "How much more time?" Raphael asked. "I don't know," Amara said honestly. "But when I'm ready to try again, I want to try with someone who has learned how to stay, someone who chooses love over fear, faith over doubt, presence over running away." "I've learned those things," Raphael said. "I'm still learning them every day." "Then keep learning," Amara said softly. "Keep showing up. Keep proving that the man who loves me is stronger than the man who left me." As they walked out into the snowy Vermont night, Raphael understood that he had been given something infinitely precious. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of forgiveness. The chance to prove that love could survive even devastating mistakes, that sometimes the most important journey was the one that led you back to where you started, humbler, wiser, and more grateful for the love you had almost lost forever. Chapter 10. The Greatest Revenge. On the first anniversary of what should have been their wedding day, Amara Wells stood in her art studio holding a letter that would either resurrect her greatest love or bury it forever. The morning light streaming through the windows of Amara's studio above the Millbrook Arts Center painted everything in shades of gold and possibility. Exactly 1 year had passed since she was supposed to walk down the aisle in Central Park, wearing the dress that now hung in a closet 300 miles away, but the woman who stood before her easel bore little resemblance to the heartbroken bride who had fled New York with nothing but a suitcase and shattered dreams. The painting she had been working on for weeks was nearly complete, a canvas showing 2 figures dancing in the rain, their faces lifted to the sky as water cascaded around them in sheets of silver. It was a memory made manifest, a recreation of the night she and Raphael had been caught in a sudden downpour outside the Italian restaurant where they'd had their first real date. In the painting, their joy was palpable, infectious, the kind of happiness that made observers smile without understanding why. But today, Amara couldn't focus on brushstrokes or color theory. Today, her attention was consumed by the letter that had arrived that morning, addressed in handwriting she recognized despite the months that had passed since she'd last seen it. The envelope bore a Vermont postmark, which meant Raphael was still in Millbrook, still living his quiet life of volunteer work and art classes and patient waiting. For 12 months, he had kept his promise to stay, to prove through actions rather than words that he had fundamentally changed. He had become a fixture in the community, beloved by the children at the art center, respected by local business owners, integrated into the fabric of small-town life with a grace that had surprised everyone, including Amara. With trembling fingers, Amara opened the envelope and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside, immediately recognizing Raphael's distinctive handwriting. "My dearest Amara, today marks 1 year since we were supposed to become husband and wife, and I wanted you to know that I remember, not with bitterness or regret, but with gratitude for the lesson. That day taught me about the difference between loving someone and knowing how to love them well. I've spent the past 12 months learning to be the kind of man who deserves a second chance, not just from you, but from life itself. I've learned that grand gestures are meaningless without daily consistency, that words are empty without actions to support them, and that love is not a feeling to be protected, but a choice to be made over and over again. You were right to leave me. You were right to demand better. You taught me that real love doesn't ask, 'Are you sure?' Real love says, 'I'm sure,' and then proves it every day. I know I have no right to ask anything of you after the pain I caused, but on this anniversary of our almost wedding, I'm asking anyway. Will you paint with me? Just once? Not as a romantic gesture or a step toward reconciliation, but as two artists who once created beautiful things together and might be able to do so again. If you say yes, meet me at Miller's Pond tomorrow at sunset. If you say no, I'll understand. Whatever you choose, I want you to know that loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life, and losing you has been my greatest teacher. With all my love and respect, Raphael, I've enclosed something I hope you'll accept regardless of your decision about tomorrow." Amara looked back into the envelope and found a smaller piece of paper, a check made out to the Millbrook Art Center for an amount that made her gasp. It was enough to fund the program for 3 years, to hire additional teachers, to expand into new workshops and community outreach programs. It was a gift with no strings attached, no conditions, no expectation of gratitude or reconciliation. That evening, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Amara found herself walking the familiar path to Miller's Pond without having consciously decided to go. Her feet had carried her there while her mind wrestled with implications, and by the time she realized where she was headed, it was too late to turn back without seeming cowardly. Raphael was already there when she arrived, sitting on the same fallen log where he had found her painting 12 months ago. He had set up 2 easels facing the pond, each equipped with a fresh canvas and a complete set of paints. Between them sat a small table holding brushes and a thermos that probably contained coffee. He stood when he saw her approach, his face cycling through surprise, relief, and something that might have been joy before settling into careful neutrality. "You came," he said simply. "I came," Amara confirmed, stopping just out of arm's reach, "though I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe because you're curious about what we might create together now that we're different people than we were before." Amara looked at the easels, at the supplies he had so carefully prepared, at the man who had once been her entire world and was now something she couldn't quite define. "We are different people, aren't we?" "I think so," Raphael replied. "I hope so. The people we were before, they loved each other, but they didn't know how to trust each other completely." "And you think these new people do?" "I think these new people have learned that trust isn't the absence of doubt. It's the decision to choose faith over fear, even when doubt is present. They painted in silence as the sun slowly set behind the mountains, each lost in their own creative process, but aware of the other's presence in a way that felt both familiar and entirely new. Raphael painted the pond as he saw it, calm surface reflecting the changing sky, surrounded by trees that had witnessed countless seasons of death and rebirth. But gradually, almost without his conscious direction, a figure began to emerge from the landscape, a woman standing at the water's edge with her face turned toward the light. Amara painted more abstractly, working with colors and shapes that expressed emotion rather than depicting reality. Swirls of blue and gold danced across her canvas, punctuated by darker shades that spoke of pain, transformed into something beautiful. "Can I see?" Raphael asked, as the last light faded from the sky. They exchanged canvases, and Amara felt her breath catch as she saw Raphael's painting. The woman in his landscape was unmistakably her, but painted with a tenderness and reverence that brought tears to her eyes. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Raphael was studying her painting with equal intensity. "It looks like hope," he said finally, "like two people finding their way back to each other across impossible distance." "Is that what we're doing?" Amara asked. "Finding our way back to each other?" "I don't know," Raphael admitted. "But I know that sitting here with you, creating something beautiful together, feels like the most natural thing in the world." "And who is that?" "Two people who love each other enough to do the hard work of learning how to love each other well." Amara set down his painting and turned to face him fully. In the gathering darkness, illuminated only by the moon's reflection on the water, Raphael looked like a man who had been refined by fire, stripped of everything non-essential until only the best parts remained. "I'm still scared," she said softly. "So am I," Raphael replied. "But I'm more scared of spending the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if we had been brave enough to try again. And if we try and it doesn't work? Then at least we'll know we tried. At least we'll know that we didn't let fear make our decisions for us." Amara looked out over the pond, its surface now dark as ink, reflecting stars that were just beginning to appear. "I don't want to go back to what we had before," she said finally. "Neither do I," Raphael agreed. "What we had before was beautiful, but it was built on unsteady ground. If we're going to try again, I want to build something stronger, more honest, more resilient. What would that look like?" "I don't know," Raphael said honestly, "but I think it would start with both of us being completely honest about our fears, our needs, our non-negotiables. And it would require you to choose us over your doubts every single time." "Yes," Raphael said without hesitation, "and it would require you to believe that I'm capable of making that choice. That's asking a lot." "Love asks a lot," Raphael replied, "but it also gives a lot. The question is whether we think what we could have together is worth the risk of trying." Amara stood up from the log and walked to the edge of the water, her reflection wavering on the dark surface. "Raphael," she said without turning around. "Yes? If we do this, if we try again, I need you to understand that I'm not the same woman you fell in love with in New York. I'm stronger now, more sure of what I deserve, less willing to compromise my own happiness." "I'm counting on it," Raphael said. "And you're not the same man who left me." "No, I'm not. I'm someone who has learned that the greatest luxury in life isn't money or power or success. It's being completely known by someone who chooses to love you anyway." Amara turned around to face him, and in the moonlight she could see the truth written across his face. "One more chance," she said quietly. "But Raphael, if you hurt me again, there won't be a third chance." "There won't be a need for a third chance," Raphael said, moving closer until they were standing just a breath apart. Because I've learned that love isn't about finding someone you can live with, it's about finding someone you can't live without. Then prove it, she whispered. Prove it every day for the rest of our lives. Starting now? Starting now. When Raphael kissed her, it felt like coming home to a place that had been renovated while she was away, familiar but improved, comfortable but exciting, safe but full of possibility. It was the kiss of two people who had learned that love wasn't a destination, but a journey, not a feeling to be protected, but a choice to be made again and again. As they held each other beside the pond where their second chance had begun, Amara understood that the greatest revenge against those who tried to destroy love was to love anyway, harder, deeper, more bravely than before. Their love story hadn't ended when Raphael walked away. It had just entered a new chapter, one written with the wisdom that came from almost losing everything and choosing to fight for it anyway. The greatest revenge was not destruction, but creation, not taking a life, but choosing to build one worth living, together, one choice at a time, forever and always.